I'd say I was going to get up and exercise and I'd end up scrolling on Facebook Marketplace for 2 hours instead. Have you really tried? If I was holding a gun to your head and I said to you, you can only pick up your phone 3 times today, would you pick it up more? I don't think that you would.
There's so much focus on dopamine, and I know it's obviously essential. We need it. It's the kind of the pleasure hormone.
Our brain is wired to chase dopamine because it feels good. And things like modern technology, it's designed to exploit that system. Every time you get a notification, a like, a new message, or a funny video, your brain releases a bit of dopamine and your brain says, yes, more of that, please. So you keep checking and scrolling and refreshing, and not because you're weak, but because your brain is doing exactly what it's wired to do.
An average worker will check their email or their Slack every 6 minutes. I mean, that is wild. People feel like they're weak.
It breaks my heart when people think like this.
How important is it for people to just not give up?
I actually find that is the difference between the people that succeed and the people that go off course altogether. It's the can-do attitude. It's the, I know that I can do this and I'm just gonna get up and keep going.
When that happens to you, you think, oh, I couldn't do it. Oh, I'm a loser. I failed at it. I'm no good at it. And then people stop.
Just because we've had a setback doesn't mean we're a failure. It literally just means that we are human.
It's the ups and downs. I think it's important maybe for people to acknowledge that, don't you think? Welcome to SWIISH Wellness Unlocked, the podcast that cuts through the noise and gets straight to what works. We're your hosts, Sally Obermeder
and Maha Corbett.
We're founders of a global wellness brand that's been changing lives for over a decade. Every episode, we're going to explore the latest trends. We'll dive into breakthrough science and insights from leading experts to help you live, feel, and look your best. No fluff, just facts that work. Let's unlock it. Have you ever wondered why you do things on autopilot, like reach for your phone, skip your workout, or why you crave that 3 p.m. sugar hit every single day? Well, it's just the power of habits. They're wired into the brain, literally. And understanding the neuroscience behind them is the first step to learning how to actually change them. In this conversation, we're joined by Dr. Gina Cleo. She's one of the world's leading experts in habit change. She's going to break down the science behind how habits are formed, how we can build better ones, and what it really takes to break the ones that no longer serve us. So whether you want to shift your morning routine, stop procrastinating, or just understand your own brain a little bit better, this chat is for you. All right, let's unlock it. So let's talk about dopamine and I guess, coming at dopamine addiction for adults. When does it become a problem?
I'm not sure if we're addicted to dopamine or if it's something that we're just constantly chasing. The word, I guess, addiction and habit, we do use interchangeably. But an addiction is something that we feel very compulsive, that we feel like we just can't live without. Whereas we have seen through research that our constant urge and need for dopamine is something that we can control. So I guess it's one of those things that when you start to realize that it's impacting your life and you're enjoying other things much less, like spending time with your family or being in nature, that's probably the time where you might think to yourself, okay, I think that I'm chasing dopamine too much. It is not serving me anymore. And you might want to look at your daily habits.
Is it a case where it starts out, because let's face it, if we talk about most things that give us dopamine, if we just kind of go real simple, like say screen time, it does feel good, or online shopping, it does feel good. And until it hits kind of a point where then it just doesn't.
Yeah. So we can build a dopamine tolerance where essentially our brain gets used to a certain level of dopamine that we're getting and we want more and more and more of it. And that's why the more dopamine we give ourselves, the less we start to feel it when we're doing those low-line healthy things that also give us dopamine, like exercising or eating really healthy food. And why things like drugs, like recreational drugs, can be so damaging to our dopamine or our reward system because they give us such a huge spike in dopamine that nothing in nature is going to make us feel that good, which is why we become addicted to the behaviors that give us those big hits of dopamine.
It's so interesting. It's hard to then come back into low levels of dopamine and find it satisfying.
That's right. Yeah.
What do you think in terms of how has society changed, right? Obviously, like before we had phones and screens and not even really just phones and screens, but just the immediacy that we can get dopamine with. How has that changed? Because we're hardwired to some extent, but then now the world has shifted so much.
Oh my gosh, so much. And our brain is wired to chase dopamine because it feels good, like you mentioned. And things like modern technology, it's designed to exploit that system. Every time you get a notification, a like, a new message, or a funny video, your brain releases a bit of dopamine and your brain says, yes, more of that, please. So you keep checking and scrolling and refreshing, and not because you're weak, but because your brain is doing exactly what it's wired to do. And the downside of that constant overstimulation is that we become less sensitive to dopamine. The same things don't feel as rewarding anymore. We start to crave more stimulation more often. We might also find that we're getting bored really easily, especially when certain things used to give us enjoyment. They're not anymore.
Yeah.
We lose focus, patience. We struggle with delayed gratification because we're used to getting it instantly. I call it reflexive dopamine, where your phone is so close to you, you can just reflexively pick it up and grab it at any time. And so I really like creating spatial boundaries around where my phone is. I have no phone zones in my house.
Oh, wow.
One of them is the dining room, because I don't ever want to be in a conversation with a friend or family member and then get a notification and be distracted by that, because I want to be present. And the other place for me is my bedroom, because I value sleep a lot more than I value scrolling.
That's amazing. That's actually a really interesting thing, because you're right, it's so close. You can reach for it any time, I read a stat saying that basically it was a stat about office, like people in the office here, I think I wrote it down. It was something like, here we go. So the average adult spends 6 hours and 38 minutes a day on screens connected to the internet. And that there was something about let me see if I can find it, because I actually thought it was wild. It was about, here it is. So
every 6 minutes.
Yes, every 6 minutes. An average worker will check their email or their Slack every 6 minutes. I mean, that is wild, isn't it?
It is wild, especially when you think it takes our brain about 20 minutes to fully refocus again after an interruption, which just goes to show that most of us are running these apps in the background, whether it's emails, messages, or Slack, or whatever it is. So we're essentially working in this state of fragmented attention all day long. And so no wonder we are feeling scattered. I've got, when I was writing my book, one of the things I would do is I'd put my phone on airplane mode. And that's how I found my flow and my hyperfocus. And I couldn't just reflexively pick up my phone. And, when I was doing my PhD, for example, I'd be like, I'm stuck on a word. And then I'd find myself scrolling and I'm like, Gina, the word you're looking for is not on Instagram. I can guarantee it. But my brain was like, this is hard. I want something more enjoyable. And we'd chase dopamine in these times.
Correct.
If it wasn't my phone, it would be the fridge or pantry. It's like, maybe sugar will help me.
Yes.
But we lose focus. And so it is important to try to avoid, put boundaries around those distractions. It's so important for our brain to be able to hyperfocus.
You made a really good point before you said people feel like they're weak. And I think that's a really good point. People say things like, I'm too weak, or I'm not productive, or I'm unfocused, or I'm scattered. So they blame themselves, I guess, that they're not able to, stay the course.
Yeah. It breaks my heart when people think like this, because these apps, these social media apps in particular, have invested millions of dollars in learning exactly what is going to keep you scrolling on these apps for as long as possible, because the longer you're on the app, the more money that they make. And we're talking behavioral psychologists, neuroscientists, people that understand exactly how your brain works. And now with the introduction of AI, there is just no winning.
Yeah.
The apps know exactly, for example, how many seconds between each dog or cat video you need to stay engaged. It's kind of like a slot machine.
Isn't it?
There's a certain number of fails that you'll accept as long as there's intermittent wins in there as well. And these apps are doing the same thing. It's giving you intermittent things it knows that you absolutely love to engage with. And it'll do it at the exact same number of seconds that it knows you need to stay on these apps for a really long time. That's just one thing. We're talking then like the certain sounds and things they give you makes it totally hijacks our reward system.
So is it possible then to decide that you want to take you're right when you said I've created a physical barrier. If you don't create a physical barrier, is it impossible?
It's not impossible, but it requires so much willpower and discipline and self-control. And, you know, when you think of willpower, it's a very fleeting resource. You know, self-control is kind of like a muscle.
Yes.
And say you're at the gym and you're doing a set of bicep curls. Eventually your arm's going to get sore and you need to put the dumbbell down and rest your arm before you can do another set of lifts. And self-control works in exactly the same way. The more you use it throughout the day, the more exhausted it gets. And so here you are saying to yourself, I'm only going to scroll for 5 minutes. And that time you're constantly using self-control to try to stop yourself, and you're fighting against this dopaminergic app that's designed to keep you on there. So, you know, my whole thing is, why do it? Because you're now giving up your self-control for other things like eating a great meal or exercising or going to bed on time or not reacting negatively to your kids or your partner.
Yes.
So create physical boundaries. Don't depend on your self-control because it's a very precious resource.
I read once that self-control is very much like kind of a think of it like a tank of petrol, and as it depletes, it's not endless, you know, and as it depletes, so exactly what you've just described, if you use it somewhere and you've run out, then when you go and you need it for something, you've already exhausted it.
Exactly. And the way to replenish it is by rest, sleep, meditation. You know, it's all those slow things. It is not by picking up your phone.
Yeah. So let's talk about habits, because the offset of self-control is so that you don't need self-control. And this isn't just about phones, but just life in general. I want to talk about, you know, so many people have things that they want in their life. For example, I want to start an exercise program. I want to eat better. I want to, you know, get up at 5. I want whatever the thing is that they want, right? And coming back to self-control and willpower and then like having it run out. I don't want to say the formula, but the thing to lean on then is habits, right? And I love that this is your specialty, and I really want to dive into, I guess, habits and how we can, like, let's start simply maybe with like, how do people start?
Yeah, I love this question. And you're so right. The only way we can not depend on our self-control is through habits, because we do habits automatically, subconsciously. They don't require self-control because we don't really think about them. We just do them. Things that require self-control need a lot of energy, a lot of cognitive resources.
Yes.
But no matter how tired or stressed or hungry you are, you'll always put your seatbelt on in the car because it's a habit. And that is the magic of creating habits. So the first step is to really decide what you want to do, and then think of something really small that you can do to get you towards that goal. So if it's, you know, having less screen time, for example, that might be not charging your phone in your bedroom, or putting no phone times around your phone, where you might use like a tech prohibiting app or a lockbox or whatever it is that you want to do. And then doing that consistently. Just do the same thing every day, and then use a habit tracker and tick off every time you've done it.
Yep.
And that gives you a much more natural and balanced dopamine hit. It's kind of like when you give a child like a gold star when they've done their chores and they feel awesome for it.
Yeah.
We don't provide that reward learning as adults. So give yourself a little tick, have a moment where you're acknowledging that you did something that you wanted to do, and stay consistent with it. And eventually it'll feel like second nature.
And it is one of the, as somebody who's an all or nothing person, one of the things that I find tricky probably, is that when I go to and I want to create a habit, I'm all in, right? So it's like, okay, so I want to start an exercise program. So I think what I'll do is I'll get up at 5 and I'm going to go to someplace it's like nowhere near my house. And it's like, it's almost like I'm making it so difficult, as opposed to small, easy steps. What do you suggest? How should people begin?
You want to start with something so small you feel like you can't say no to doing it. And it's interesting because the idea of starting small in itself is actually so much harder said than done, because we want to overhaul our lives naturally. We've got all this motivation when we start something and we're excited and we've bought all the tools and we're like ready to go with it. But inevitably what happens is we run out of that motivation. And if we don't have that habit already established, or at least on its way to being established, that's when we fall off the wagon, which is why most of our New Year's resolutions are forgotten by the time February comes around. We just haven't sustained it.
Yeah.
I worked with a client once who hadn't exercised for years, and his doctor said to him, like, you really need to start doing some exercise for your heart health. And he felt so daunted at the idea of moving his body at all. I mean, this guy hardly even walked around his own house. And so I said to him, for the first week, all I want you to do is put your shoes on. That's it. Nothing else.
Wow.
And eventually, he did that. And then he eventually went out to his letterbox and down the road and around the corner. And then a year later, he signed himself up to one of those 10K races and now considers himself an avid walker.
Wow.
And I remember him saying to me, if you had told me that I'd be walking 10 kilometers, I would have thought you were crazy. But you gave me something so small, I knew I couldn't say no to doing it. And that's the power of small steps. Also, the very first step's always the hardest, right?
Yes,
It's the first workout, the first time you eat kale, it's the first of everything.
Yes.
So if we can reduce the barrier to entry, that's when we get this beautiful compounding effect and you make the start much more doable.
Yes. How important is it, or do you think people should rely on friends and or partners? And what I mean by this is, if you said to me, for example, let's just say I wanted to start in my mind, I'm like, I'm going to start running, right? And it's like, I'm technically not a runner. But if you said to me, hey, Sal, let's get together and go for a run, I won't want to let you down, right? So I'll be like, okay, well, Gina wants to, I'll do that. And that could probably very easily be the thing that keeps me consistent, whereas if it was just me by myself, do you think people should do that? Or is that kind of a false setup because you're not training yourself to decide on a goal, establish a habit and stay with it?
I think accountability obviously is really important. I'm not sure that depending on another friend or family member is sustainable, only because, look, if I'm already a runner and I'm like, hey, Sal, let's go, then that's okay because you know that I'm already a runner. But if you're starting a new habit with someone else who hasn't established that habit already, that can be a slippery slope into danger zone where you both could maybe self-sabotage the whole system. I have been the most consistent in my life with exercise because I've signed up to this Pilates gym where if I don't go to my scheduled class, they charge me. So I get fined for it. So not only am I paying, my weekly retainer, I'm also getting fined on top of that. And so you better believe I'm going to Pilates at least 3 times a week. So what happens is eventually it does become a habit. It doesn't matter how it started. It does become a habit. If it's something that you start, if you start to really enjoy running, then you're getting that reward from it yourself. Yes, it can develop into a habit.
So you make a good point there, which is that, do we form habits based on positive reward, or is it actually that, like in this particular case, it's like you're being penalized or punished, if you don't do it? Which way, as humans, which way do we lean, or is it both?
We prefer positive reward, definitely. Our brain prefers that. But there is also, the idea of consequence avoidance that does also drive motivation and drives us to do something. I think what sustains the habit, though, is the fact that I feel awesome after Pilates. I feel great. And so there is also a positive reward there as well.
The dopamine. What's the biggest mistake that people make when it comes to setting a goal and not building habits?
Over and over again, I see that people are trying to change too many things at once, and they're trying way too hard. So they're creating these really big goals, and they are depending on their willpower to get there rather than starting really small. And especially all or nothing thinkers, like, you and I'm sort of trying to be a recovered all or nothing thinker. And the idea of starting small feels tedious. And then we look at what other people are doing and they're achieving so much. But the idea of starting small is something that I started to value a lot more when I absolutely had to. A few years ago, I went through a really traumatic event, and I went from a place of, running this really successful global company and speaking on stages all over the world, to developing agoraphobia, which is the fear of leaving your own house. And I went through sort of this weird mental crack where I had to teach myself again how to brush my teeth and how to shower, and it was so wild going from where I was to where I had gotten to. And the idea of trying to go back to the person I was just the day before, it was impossible. I couldn't do it. And I had to learn okay, Gina, today we're going to learn how to brush our teeth again. And I would do that. And then the next day when I'd brush my teeth, I'd be like, oh, that was easier than yesterday. And I'm like, okay, this is neuroplasticity. This is how I'm rewiring my brain again. And again, with leaving the house, it was literally one step at a time, until now I'm back to my pre-trauma Gina and even better.
Yeah.
And it took small, tiny steps to get there.
How did you, if you don't mind me asking, because that's no small feat. I mean, I know you've sort of described it simplistically, but I can only imagine that that's actually huge. Like, you're essentially starting again. How do you hold yourself through that?
Oh, it was huge. There was a lot of support. I had a lot of beautiful friends and family around me, a whole lot of therapy.
Good.
And a streak of some serious stubbornness to just be like, this cannot break me.
Yeah.
So I would say those three things. Yeah.
And how important is it with, I guess, because it's similar to, anything that takes time, how much patience do you need to have? And I guess also sometimes these things are 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Same with habits, right? Sometimes it's not sort of an immediate line like this, like I'm going to start and it's just a trajectory of upwards, right? It's very, like anything, it can be very up and down.
It is very up and down. And sometimes those backward steps feel like you're back at square one, and it can be so frustrating. But I think it's just really important to remember that the more you do something, the more it gets embedded in your brain. And you're not starting from scratch. You're starting from experience, and it does become more of a flow. And in the same way, the less you do something, the less automatic and less habitual it gets. And so I knew that, and this is for everyone, every time you do your desired habit, you're making it even easier for your tomorrow self to do it again.
Future self. We used to talk about this sometimes, Maha and I, say if it was meal prep, we'd be like, Thursday Sally is going to be so happy that Monday Sally did the meal prep, and I kind of, because on Monday you don't want to do the meal prep. You're like, oh, I don't want to do this. But you kind of, the looking out for future me sometimes made that, you would look ahead and be like, she'll be so happy, do it for her, as a way to also help build that habit.
Yeah, it's a great way to motivate yourself, definitely. And just to remember how good it feels. And then oftentimes I find, like, when you get started, it's not that bad.
Yes.
Like, it's okay.
Yes.
I think getting into it is the hardest part. And then once you're in it, whether it's exercise or meal prepping, you just find your flow and it's all good.
What are the biggest habits that you see that people want to cultivate and create?
There's a few main ones. They are using their phones less. I guess that's breaking their habit, but they want to have regular healthy meals. They want to exercise more. They want to have a better morning routine. And then some of the things they want to stop is they want to procrastinate less, get to bed on time, not snooze their alarm in the morning, and not snack when they're not hungry.
Interesting. Can we talk about procrastinating less? That's an interesting one because I feel like people classify themselves as either a procrastinator or not a procrastinator, as if it's like I'm a blonde or a brunette, like it's as opposed to it being, like you said, a habit. What are some tips for people who are procrastinators?
Or it's good to, find your why. Like, why is it that you're procrastinating? When are you doing it? What is it that you're trying to avoid? A lot of the time, procrastination is because the thing that we're trying to do is either too big and it's scary, or it's too small and it's boring. Or it could be that we're just trying to avoid an uncomfortable emotion, whether it's doing something that scares us a little bit, and so we're a bit anxious about it, or we're not sure how to do it. So again, there's that uncertainty. And so it's actually more about emotional regulation than forcing yourself to do it, which can be a controversial opinion. But I've spoken to so many psychologists that agree with this idea that not procrastinating is really about regulating our emotions better.
So can you talk to me a bit more about that? What do you mean by that?
Well, if we're trying to avoid an uncomfortable emotion, we're essentially running away from it. And that manifests in procrastinating, in not doing the thing we know that we need to do or should be doing. And so if we can tackle those things head on to say, I know I don't feel like doing this, but I need to do it anyway, so I may as well just sit here and get it done, then that is that emotional regulation. It's overcoming the discomfort of that uncomfortable feeling. I know that when I was writing my book, it's something that I really practiced. And I just set a habit of every day at 9 a.m., I'm going to sit at my desk and I'm going to block out 1 hour. And some days I'd look up and I'd be like, oh my goodness, I've been writing for 4 hours straight. And other days, all I had to say is my dog's sitting by my feet and the birds are chirping outside. Like I had no creative flow, but I still sat there and I committed to doing that. And that is how I felt like writing my book was fairly effortless.
Wow, that's amazing. The thing you described about emotional regulation is almost like about, or would you say it's like holding yourself through the uncomfortableness?
I think it's, acknowledging, being like, okay, this is going to suck to start with. Like doing this is not going to feel comfortable. I don't want to do it. But we can do hard things and we just need to push through and just do it. And you can just say like, I'm going to commit to it for just 2 minutes. Make it really easy. Again, starting small. I'm going to commit to it for 30 seconds. Recently I've been wanting to tidy up my laundry cupboards, the dreaded laundry cupboards. And it's daunting to think of doing all of them, right? Yes. I've got a lot of stuff in here.
Yeah.
But I just said to myself, okay, I'm just going to do one shelf. And then all of a sudden I was much more motivated to do one shelf. I put some music on and I was like, okay, one shelf. Yeah. And again, I found myself doing most of the cupboard.
Yeah, I love that. What do you think about habit stacking?
Yeah, habit stacking is a term that in the research is called cue response association. So it's the same thing, and it's really important when we're trying to create new habits. All of our habits are triggered by something, and that's going to be the time of day, the place that you're in, what you've just done beforehand, the emotion you're feeling, or the people that you're around. And so essentially habit stacking is about applying the new habit that you want to create to something that you already do in your day-to-day. So for example, when I finish dinner, I will feed my dog. When my head hits the pillow, I'll think of one thing that went well that day. So you're essentially stacking your habit to something else. And the real beauty of it is you use less memory. Yes. And our brain loves associations. Yeah. And so you start to associate those two things together.
Yeah. We at SWIISH, we have supplements, and people always ask us, I'm going to start my routine. Like, when should I do it? And I always say, start and do it at the time when it is most like association, exactly like you said. So if you wake up and, for example, the first thing you do is go to put the kettle on, then put the supplements near the kettle. And while the kettle's boiling, that's when you take, your vitamins, do your sort of supplement stack then. If you're, for example, that's not you, you'll never forget. Like your seatbelt example, we're so habitually trained to brush our teeth, which is so great, right? It's not an occasional thing. It's every single night you'll brush your teeth. So pop your supplements there. Like just kind of put it where you can't forget,
Yeah.
And that's the thing. I think that, like you said, removing the having to remember,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
just
that's it.
leaning on something else,
Yeah. And that's creating an environment for success. It's really all about our environment.
What about professional habits? What kind of professional habits do people want to create?
Professional, like in a workplace, you mean?
In a workplace or for their career or, that you see.
People often talk about work-life balance, and procrastination is another one that comes up. But there's other things as well, like not experiencing negative self-talk in a meeting or wanting to save more money. It really ranges. There's quite a big range with it. But I don't find that it's hugely different from people who work for themselves or students or parents. They tend to be really similar genres of habits.
Are the rules the same no matter what, whether it's like I want to start saving money or I want to like reduce my negative self-talk? Are the rules around the habits identical?
They are. And that is what I love about habit change, is that once you understand the theory, you can apply it to anything. And that is just such a powerful and it's such an empowering thing to know. It's like, okay, I just need to nail down the theory of this. And then I've got this amazing tool that I can apply to any area of my life.
So if we were to unlock this for people and give them the kind of the step-by-steps, it's like whether you want to get up at 5 a.m., whether you want to improve your diet, reduce your self-talk, whatever your kind of goal might be, if you were to break down the habits that they would need to implement, what would those sort of 5 steps, 3 steps, whatever it is be?
Yeah, so it's having the goal. It's then deciding when and where you're going to do it. So you're creating that stack. It's actually doing it every time you experience that you come across that trigger. So you might need a reminder at first, whether it's like a phone alarm or something like that. And then it's ticking off every time that you've done it with a habit tracker. And habit trackers, they can come in apps or there's paper-based ones as well. I've got a whole list of all the apps on my website.
Right. We'll share those in the notes, the podcast notes.
Yeah, cool. And then it's just keep on keeping on. It's just like doing it consistently, day in, day out. The more you do it, the more automatic it'll be.
And how important is it for people to just not give up? Like you'll miss a day, you'll skip a day, life will get in the way, something will happen, to kind of be kind to yourself, but then get back on the horse.
I actually find that is the difference between the people that succeed and the people that go off course altogether. It's the can-do attitude. It's the I know that I can do this and I'm just going to get up and keep going. Setbacks are an inevitable part of any change journey.
Yeah.
I read a quote once and I hated it, but it's true. And it said, it's not if you fall down, it's when you fall down. And it's so, so true because life does happen. People get sick. You have extra responsibility. Things come up. Life does life.
Yes.
And it's not about trying to avoid setbacks. It's about learning how to navigate them and get back on track quickly.
Yes.
Instead of saying, I'm going to start Monday or when I get back from my holiday, start now. There's the very next minute. You just pick yourself up and just keep going.
And just go. I think it's also, I suspect it's also important too when people are trying to create a new habit and, you might be like kind of looking at somebody else who has that habit and sort of being like, oh, I really want to kind of emulate that to some extent. And so much of what we see is what I think is very much a highlight reel. So you're not really seeing the person fail or like I was saying before, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So therefore, when that happens to you, you think, oh, I couldn't do it. Oh, I'm a loser. I failed at it. I'm no good at it. And then people stop. But actually, no one just permanently just does something, kind of better and better every single day. It's the ups and downs. And I think it's important maybe for people to acknowledge that, don't you think?
Oh my gosh, big time. It's so important because what happens, the danger of getting these thoughts like, I can't do it, I'm not good enough at this, is because the number one predictor of success is something called self-efficacy, which is the belief in our own ability to achieve a task. And when we practice negative self-talk, when we say, I'm just not someone who can do this, we are squashing our self-efficacy and it becomes a self-fulfilling cycle. And so it's so important to see setbacks as just that, like we're just human. Just because we've had a setback doesn't mean we're a failure. It literally just means that we are human. And again, like to expect that it'll happen.
What you just said is so fascinating. How valuable is it, or is it not valuable? Like to have affirmations that you tell yourself, about the belief you have in yourself or the belief you have in your goal. Does that make a difference?
It does. And you don't have to say affirmations that you don't believe. That actually doesn't really work. The most powerful way to have those affirmations is when you do something that you didn't want to do, say like you're meal prepping on Monday, is then to just share a moment with yourself where you can just acknowledge that you've done that. Just be like, go me, I did that and that felt really good. And that's how your brain starts to rewire itself into seeing you are someone who can do hard things. You are someone who's disciplined and you are someone who values your health and wellness. And then it starts to see those characteristics in you in other areas. And that's how we change our self-identity.
So interesting, because it's almost like what you're saying is also it's the patting yourself on the back even when they're small things, and then that builds up into your identity of being able to do harder things, bigger things.
Yeah. There's a part in our brain called the reticular activating system, or the RAS. And essentially we are creating filters for the RAS all the time. We are priming it. And the RAS is the reason, say you buy a white Tesla, you start to notice all these white Teslas on the road. You're like, everyone's got a white Tesla.
Right. Yes.
There isn't objectively more white Teslas on the road. You're just noticing them because you've primed your RAS to notice them. You've told your RAS, this is something that's important to me. And that's why achieving really small things and acknowledging them is actually so powerful, because we start to prime our RAS to see ourselves as someone who can succeed, who does achieve things, who does do hard things.
For people who maybe naturally have a bit of negative self-talk or can hear their, I don't want to say parents, but sometimes we hear a voice and it might not be our voice, right? So you're hearing someone else's voice say negative things to you about you. How can those people start to unwire that or undo that and have positive self-talk for themselves?
The first step is probably noticing when and where it's happening. A lot of the times those negative self-talks will happen in a certain environment, and it could be when you're in a meeting or when you're around certain family members, or you're walking in a gym and you're like, I'm the biggest person here. And so noticing when it's happening and catching it before it happens. So for example, if you notice yourself when you walk into a meeting having negative self-talk, next time you're about to go into a meeting, start your positive self-talk then. You can say, okay, historically, I haven't been someone who has been courageous enough to share my opinion, but that's changing. And today I'm going to share my opinion about something. So it's really about that self-awareness.
Yeah, I guess. And then when you do share your opinion, patting yourself on the back for doing it in setting up that cycle of positivity. That's amazing.
Yeah.
How did you end up in this line of study?
I actually started my career as a dietitian.
Wow.
And I was really struggling with my own habits. I just couldn't stay consistent. And I also found that a lot of the clients I was working with just would end up in my clinic working on the very same things we'd already worked on. And so I became really fascinated with the brain, with neuroscience, with why we do the things we do, with why it is I'd say I was going to get up and exercise and I'd end up scrolling on Facebook Marketplace for 2 hours instead. And then I was invited at Bond University to do a PhD, and I got to pick the topic, and it was this. It was naturally, how do we sustain behavior long term? And everything I read pointed to the fact that the only way we can achieve long-term success is through habits. And so I started my career in habits, and I really fell into it. I was just happy to be like just a researcher, and not just a researcher, but just doing research and publishing the science. But once my research got picked up by media, it was history then.
Wow.
I got contacted by a lot of organizations, and now it's what I do full time. Lots of corporate speaking and writing programs and, publishing a book. And
amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It was meant to be. What was your PhD on specifically?
It was specifically looking at weight loss maintenance, on how can people, lose weight in a healthy way and then maintain that weight loss long term, long after a program had finished.
Yes.
And, it went beyond that, obviously, but that was in my initial, I guess, question or hypothesis.
Yeah. What's the number one question people ask you? You go to a dinner party and you talk about what you do. What's the first thing people ask you?
How do I break my phone addiction? Probably is the most common question that I get.
So people want that. So that's a common thing. Wow.
Really, really common. Yeah. It's so huge. It's actually so big that I feel compelled to write a mini course about it, because I just think it would help so many people. I think screen time is only going to get harder to avoid with the rise in technology and AI. And I think that we need to act now.
And what do you tell them? What are besides the physical separation that you do, which I think is so clever, what other tips do you give them?
Look, I try not to talk shop at a dinner party.
Hard. I reckon people would pin you down.
Yeah, it gets a bit like that. Or they feel like I'm judging them when they pick up their phone. I'm like, I really don't care what you do. But it's such a personal thing, right? Again, it's like looking at their triggers, creating physical boundaries, coming home to themselves, like, why is it that you're doing that? And what have you tried? And have you really tried? If I was holding a gun to your head and I said to you, you can only pick up your phone 3 times today, would you pick it up more? I don't think that you would. And so it's really like, it's just having some hard conversations sometimes.
That's so interesting. Oh, this has been such a good chat. I am so grateful. Thank you so much for doing this with us. I really it's been so insightful, really, and I know a lot of people will get a lot out of it.
Oh, I'm glad. It was an absolute pleasure speaking with you.
God.
Thanks for having me.
Well, that's a wrap on Wellness Unlocked. If it hit home, then hit follow, share it, and dive into the show notes for all of the links and any of the resources. Head to SWIISH.com for more, and if you're in Australia, you can also find us in Priceline stores. Now, we want to hear from you what resonated, what you want more of, and what you're curious about next. This is your space for wellness that works.
Remember, everything we cover is for general informational purposes only and is not a substitute for medical advice. Always consult your healthcare professional before making any changes to your health or wellness routine.